Minister, from your sort of best analysis, the accusations from the aid organisations that this was a systematic, deliberate attack, what do you think happened?
It's very difficult to say. As you were saying earlier on, we're not sure that we're going to get a sort of an open, transparent examination of what happened, because it's actually being done by the Israeli Defense Forces. But the indicators are that Israel is now having major difficulties in Gaza in trying to control Hamas. You'll recall they had this 2-week operation in one of the major hospitals in the northern part of Gaza. And that was a hospital in an area which the Israelis thought was completely cleared of Hamas something like 3 months ago. And the thing is, the organization was very well prepared for this. And frankly, trying to control an insurgency in an urban area where the people who you're opposing are very well prepared and are prepared to die is extremely difficult to do. And the Israelis are not succeeding in doing this. One of the things that is happening there is that falling back on what is known as the Hale doctrine, where you actually direct your targeting, if you like, at the wider community. This has been a part of Israeli military policy, well understood and written up and the rest, and published by the various think tanks in Israel, which goes right back to 2006 and operations in Lebanon. And the effect of this is that Israelis are more prepared, bluntly, to target civilians. And a lot of information has been coming out of Israel in the last 48 hours to indicate how this works. And the indications are that Israel more generally is really reluctant to hold back when civilians may get killed. There's a rule of thumb, apparently, that if you're targeting a lower level person in Hamas, a paramilitary, then it is acceptable to have up to 15 people killed who are non-combatants. And this is how you tend to get a problem of much wider civilian casualties, to be blunt about this. Now, what I'm saying is all pretty well documented in Israeli documentation. So this isn't something which I think should shock people. Israel can only control Hamas, it now believes, by damaging the wider community, a kind of deterrent effect. And that, I think, is what we're seeing. And if you look at it that way, a lot of what's happening becomes rather more understandable.
And Paul, we know from the IDF and Netanyahu, they say that their main objective is to eliminate Hamas. Now, in your professional opinion, according to the tactics that are actually taking place in the Gaza Strip, what do you believe the main objective to be?
I think that is probably right. They want to get rid of Hamas. The problem is that you cannot get rid of Hamas. It's an idea, and it goes back for decades because of the way in which Gaza has been controlled. You've actually got to go back to the root of the problem. That is very difficult for the Israelis to do. One has to remember that the 7th of October attacks were absolutely traumatic for Israeli Jews as a nation. And I think this is why they're taking strong action. There's a great deal of frustration. One of the problems with Britain, going back to your earlier discussion, is that it's probably very likely that the drone which was used to kill these people was actually a Hermes 350, and that would have been using an engine actually manufactured in Britain. And if that is true, it's information only come out in the last few hours. If that is true, then it's an extraordinary situation in that we've been allowing products to go to Israel which have been used in the killing of British people. Now, and another point which you made earlier on, one of your correspondents made earlier on, is, of course, this has only come to a head because a number of foreign people have been killed. And this has been going on for months in terms of the number of Palestinians who've been killed, who've been aid workers. And so this is why I think the whole thing is becoming controversial at a new level of intensity. And it's putting heavy pressure on, certainly on Biden, to some extent on the British Prime Minister, and, as you were just pointing out, I think on the Labour Party as well.
Paul, we're going to speak to the IDF in just a moment, but what they will say, and just briefly, just for time, they'll say is this was a mistake. We're going to put in process to make sure this doesn't happen again. But Netanyahu will caveat all of that and say, but this is what happens in war.
Well, yes, but the problem is you have rules of war law, and these are agreed by many states. International humanitarian law and the rest does actually apply. And so, yes, the war is terrible. And I should say that what I've been describing is not unlike what other countries do. It's pretty similar to the Russians in Chechnya and indeed in Ukraine. And it's pretty similar to some of the actions by the Americans and the British in the war on terror in Afghanistan and Iraq. Netanyahu is right in one sense, but it is not just Israel involved in this. And this is one of the reasons why one has to look again to know the nature of modern warfare. Now, I'm at Bradford and I work in peace studies, so expect me to say this. But the reality is we are not getting it right. And essentially, we've had a period over the last 20 years of many wars in which about 1 million civilians are being killed. And now it's a shocking total. And essentially, yes, I agree, this is part of a wider problem.